Hey, tonight we journey into a dark, silent corridor buried beneath the sands of Egypt. You carry a candle in one hand, the warm flame barely flickering against the stale tomb air. Dust clings to your boots, and your breath catches, not just from the heat, but from the weight of time pressing in around you. Each step echoes off limestone walls untouched for more than 3,000 years. A wall appears ahead, rough-hewn and sealed with plaster. The faint, ancient impressions of hieroglyphs tell you this is no ordinary doorway. Beside you stands a man in a crumpled linen shirt, sweat-streaked and wide-eyed, Howard Carter. He's trembling not with fear, but with something worse, hope. You don't speak. He raises a chisel. You nod, scrape, scrape. A flake of plaster falls, and history cracks open. You'll probably learn a lot from this. Story like how a boy king no taller than your shoulder ended up with one of the greatest treasures ever found, and how a stubborn archaeologist ignored all the rules of logic and budget to find him. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Press the notification bell to update many new videos. And hey, why not drop your city and what time it is there in the comments. It's always magical knowing who's listening from the far corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel beside Carter as he lowers a candle through a tiny breach in the stone wall. The hot wax drips onto his hand, but he doesn't flinch. Instead, he leans in, his face ghostly in the glow. You ask, barely a whisper, "Can you see anything?" He breathes out the words, "Yes, wonderful things. The hole just wide enough." For one is your portal into the past. Through it, you glimpse what looks like gold everywhere. But what's more astonishing is the arrangement. Not neat rows of royal treasure, but chaos. A gilded throne lying sideways, lion-headed couches stacked like chairs in a storage unit, and a chariot disassembled and leaning on a mannequin like someone gave up mid-project. It's a teenager's bedroom if that teenager was a pharaoh. As your candle flickers, you notice something stranger still. The air. It doesn't move. It's thick, still, stale, but sacred. You've just breathed in a piece of history no one's inhaled for 3,000 years. Carter backs away, stunned. It's untouched, he says, intact. This may seem like the moment of triumph, but Carter doesn't cheer. He doesn't even smile. Because what's before him is now a puzzle, one with traps, politics, ancient rituals, and, oh yes, rumors of curses. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's pull back soon out of this dark corridor, out through the tomb's mouth, and float over the Valley of the Kings. Picture the bleached cliffs, sun glaring overhead, and a few dusty tents huddled like stubborn thoughts in the heat. Somewhere beneath that harsh land lies a boy king barely remembered by history. His name is Tutankhamun, and until today, even many Egyptologists thought his tomb didn't exist at all. You're here because Carter refused to give up. For 6 years, he dug. People laughed, funding dried up. Other archaeologists mocked him behind their tiny glasses. They believed the valley had been stripped clean, but Carter believed in one last unclaimed space between tombs, a patch of ground many had walked over. It was under a humble workman's hut, and most people ignored it because it was just too ordinary. Turns out, that's where the pharaoh was hiding. It's funny historians still argue whether Carter truly knew where to dig, or whether he just got lucky on his last shot. Either way, you're here now. You brush your hand over the stepped descent, into the tomb. Each footfall takes you deeper, not just physically, but spiritually into Egypt's golden age. You reach the antechamber, and the candlelight spills over statues of the gods. One holds a scepter across its chest. Its eyes are obsidian. You feel watched, maybe protected, or maybe judged. The silence inside is not dead. It's electric. Here's a mainstream fact to savor. Of all the royal tombs discovered in Egypt, Tutankhamun's is the only one found mostly intact, with over 5,000 objects. That's right, 5,000. And all of it had to be catalogued by hand now. Here's your first deliciously weird fringe tidbit. Carter kept a yellow canary in a cage at the dig site. Locals believed it brought luck. But right after the tomb was breached, the bird was eaten by a Kobri Jep's royal symbol. Make of that what you will. Still feeling brave, you and Carter light another lantern. The room beyond yawns opened like a sunken dream. Chairs inlaid with ivory, a tiny ornate coffin for a pet, boxes labeled with hieroglyphs you can't read, but somehow feel. Every item was part of someone's afterlife starter pack. It's as if death didn't mean ending, but moving day one. Last thing, you turn and see its sealed doors deeper in, unopened still. You know the best is yet to come. You pause, close your eyes, and let the weight of eternity settle on your shoulders. The boy behind the mask stares out at you, not from across the room, but across the ages. You're not in the tomb anymore. You're drifting backward through centuries. Past Roman soldiers and sandstorms, past pharaohs rising and falling like waves until you land in the golden glare of 14th century BCE Egypt. Tutankhamun isn't the mighty, chiseled ruler many imagine. He's a teenager, maybe 5'6" on a good day, with a slight frame and a clubbed foot that makes walking difficult. You imagine him limping through the halls of his palace in Akhetaten, surrounded by walls painted in sunbursts and strange gods. Every step hurts, but he hides it. Kings don't wince. You wonder if he ever got to laugh, if he had friends, if he ever snuck dates from the kitchens when no one was looking. He became pharaoh at about 9 years old. That's 4th grade. While other kids were figuring out how not to eat glue, Tut was wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt and making decisions about temples and taxes. Of course, he wasn't really in charge, at least not at first. Advisors pulled the strings. Chief among them was a wily man named I, who probably saw Tut as a puppet with royal blood and none of the spine. But Tut surprised them all. Historians still argue whether the boy king was a pawn or a reformer. Some believe he reversed the radical policies of his predecessor, Akhenaten, his possible father, who had thrown the kingdom into chaos by worshipping just one god, Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten had shut down temples, fired priests, and built a capital in the middle of nowhere. Not a great move when your economy runs on tradition. Tutankhamun, or Tutankhaten as he was first named, changed that. He shifted the capital back to Thebes and restored the old gods, including the beloved Amen. His name literally changed to honor the god Tutankhamun, living image of Amen. Think about that. A sickly teen rewriting religion and politics while limping around with a bad foot and a heavy crown. And we're over here complaining when the WI fee's down. But for all that symbolism, there's something deeply personal about Tut. Maybe it's because he died so young, only around 18 or 19. That youthful fragility haunts everything about him. His tomb is smaller than usual, probably finished in a hurry. His royal gear looks almost borrowed. Some scholars even think his burial chamber was originally meant for someone else, like getting buried in your cousin's tux. Here's your quirky tidbit for this leg of the trip. CT scans of his mummy suggest that he had an overbite, wide hips, and feminine features. Some theorize he may have had a disorder like Marfan syndrome or gynecomastia. There's even evidence of a broken leg just before he died, and malaria, and a bone disease. Basically, the guy had a bingo card of health issues. You look again at the famous golden mask and feel the disconnect. It's flawless, calm, regal, but you now know the face underneath was not so perfect. That mask is not just a likeness, it's an aspiration. In life, Tutankhamun ruled during a shaky time. In death, he became immortal. Irony can be savage like that. You walked through his imagined court, courtiers bowing, incense burning, cats curling. Between columns, maybe his queen, Ankhisnamun, walks beside him, his half-sister, and possibly his only friend. She was older, wiser, and reportedly beautiful, and after his death, she vanishes from history, as if swallowed whole by the sands. Some believe she begged foreign rulers for help, even proposing marriage to a Hittite prince. But the prince was murdered on his way to Egypt. Another mystery, another whisper behind. The mask, the politics around Tut's death are murky too. Was it illness, an accident, or something more sinister? Theories range from malaria to a fall from a chariot to outright murder. You're starting to see why this kid's tomb became such a magnet for drama. Everything about him feels unresolved. Back in the present, well, the 1920s Carter didn't know any of this when he peered through that first hole. All he saw was treasure. He didn't yet know the boy king inside would go on to reshape history and stir up curses and courtroom battles for the next 100 years. But for now, just imagine being that boy. You sit quietly in a gilded room, surrounded by priests and perfume. Your bones ache. You're too young for the weight of Egypt, too old to be treated like a child. You sign decrees with trembling hands. You close your eyes, hoping the gods will forgive your ancestors' heresies. And when you open them again, you're staring at us. You Tutankhamun become a symbol, an icon, the glittering ghost of an empire, and all we really know about you, we learned after you died. Sleep tight, Your Majesty. You're back beneath the sun now, sweating. The year is 1922 again, and the Valley of the Kings yawns around you like a mouthful of secrets. It's not grand, just a blistering bowl of sand and stone, the kind of place where you can see heat rise in ghostly ripples off the ground. No birds sing here, no green grows. You shade your eyes with one hand and turn slowly in a circle, trying to imagine where a pharaoh might hide. This is where kings go to disappear. You walk beside Carter again, watching as he squints at a tattered map, then glances at the limestone cliffs. He's been coming here for years, chasing whispers. Most of the big finds, Ramses, Seti, Thutmose, have already been discovered by others. But Carter isn't looking for a legend. He's looking for a rumor, a name scratched faintly on a cup, a broken piece of faience with Tutankhamun's cartouche. Nothing solid, just smoke. That's the thing about the Valley of the Kings. It doesn't give up. It's dead easily. You're standing in one of the most sacred necropolises in the world. Deep under this stone lie dozens of tombs, some elaborate, some robbed and ruined. All of them were meant to stay hidden forever. The pharaohs, clever even in death, buried themselves in secret shafts and false chambers, leaving no sign above ground. Well, almost no sign. Carter believed there was still something left. He thought one king had slipped through the cracks to whose reign was short and whose legacy was mostly erased. Some even said the boy king was cursed, forgotten on purpose, buried hastily and in disgrace. That's why most archaeologists ignored this patch of land. Too humble, too quiet. But stubborn Carter, had a theory. The debris from another tomb, Kivi 6-2, covered what he believed to be the entrance. And he had one advantage no one else had time, well, sort of. Lord Carnarvon, his backer, had just about lost patience. He was ready to pull the plug. The money was drying up. One more season, he told Carter. Then you're done. That season began in November, and by November 4th, they'd found something, a step cut into the bedrock. Here's your historical fact for the night. The Valley of the Kings holds over 60 known tombs, but almost all had been looted in antiquity. Tutankhamun's was the first. Royal tomb found nearly untouched. Now, for your fringe tidbit, the step was discovered beneath the foundations of some workers' huts. Think about that, thousands of tourists, dozens of digs, and not one of them thought to look under the trash heap. It's like finding El Dorado beneath a porta potty. You crouch beside the team as they brush sand from the descending staircase. Every inch they reveal is a gamble. What if it's just another empty chamber? What if it's a nobleman's wine cellar? But Carter is quiet, focused. He's done this before. Then sealed doorways, with royal stamps. Your pulse skips. This isn't a joke. This is real. The door is photographed, documented, and carefully breached. Behind it, another passage. More rubble, but it's leading downward. You keep going. The air gets cooler, older. It's like the rocks themselves are watching. You hear murmurs from the workers. Some refuse to continue. The valley has a reputation. After all, even by 1922, stories of ghosts and guardians were well known. Scorpions, plagues, curses, and now a tomb no one expected. A pharaoh erased from memory. You can practically hear the mummy sighing awake in its sarcophagus, stretching old bones. Historians still argue whether Carter was methodical or simply lucky. Some say he bulldozed his way through Egypt's history with little regard for preservation. Others call him the greatest archaeologist of his age. Truth, probably a mix. He broke rules, but he also found a door no one else saw. You reach that door now. It's plain, for a royal tomb. No golden lintel, no grand statue guarding it. Just a crumbling seal and a sense that everything's about to change. You close your eyes and lean against the stone, your ear pressed to it. You don't hear anything, but you feel it. That distant hum of eternity, of history waiting to exhale. Then Carter speaks. Let's make the whole. And so you do. One chipped away piece of plaster at a time. You smell candle smoke and stone dust. Your face is pressed close to the hole, your breath fogging against the ancient plaster as Carter lowers a flickering light through the breach. The flame trembles. Your heart does. Then he sees it. That tiny, perfect room crammed to the ceiling with treasure. Now pause. Just take a second to appreciate the moment, not as a historian, not even as a tourist, but as a human. You've just looked into a room no one has seen since the Bronze Age. Over 3,000 years of silence, broken in an instant by candlelight and human wonder. The antechamber of Tutankhamun's tomb isn't organized. It's not grand. It's a chaotic glitter storm. There are chariots, disassembled and stacked like flat-pack furniture. There are thrones, their legs tangled like drunken Dancers, animal-headed couches lean at odd angles. Ebony boxes spill open. Gilded shields peek from corners. And a trumpet rests beside a fan made of ostrich feathers. Still pale and delicate. Imagine dying so young, yet having 5,000 things packed up just in case you needed them later. That's one way to beat baggage fees. You step inside with Carter, careful not to disturb a single item. Every surface is sacred, even the dust. Here's tonight's historical gem. The chamber held not only furniture and weapons, but also food, wine, clothing, even fresh linen. You half expect to find a toothbrush next, or a favorite toy. And actually, there were board games. Cnat boards with carved game pieces. You picture Tut hunched on a cushioned stool, trying to beat a priest who's letting him win. Now the odd bit, get this. Among the many lavish items was a small, plain wooden stool. No gold, no carvings, just a humble three-legged seat. Experts still scratch their heads. Was it sentimental? Was it used during rituals? Or maybe Tut just liked it because it didn't wobble. You notice something else. The walls aren't covered in the usual wall-to-wall murals and inscriptions. In fact, there's a lot of blank space. That's weird for a royal tomb. Too weird. It supports the theory that the tomb was rushed, possibly meant for someone else. Repurposed after the king died suddenly. Historians still argue whether Tutankhamun died of illness, injury, or foul play. But one thing they agree on, his burial was hasty, not slapdash, but far from the grandeur his rank demanded, which makes the treasures inside even more astounding. Carter's team, overwhelmed, doesn't rush. They photograph everything, sketch each item, number each box. It takes them nearly 10 years to fully catalogue the tomb. A single decade spent recording a single burial. But that's the price of wonder. You reach for a small gilded chest carved with a hunting scene. Inside, jewelry, amulets, and small statues. One is the god Thoth with the head of an ibis, holding a writing palette. Another is Base, the squat little dwarf god of childbirth, sticking out his tongue like a troll doll from hell. What a pantheon. Right, and just then, your lamp flickers. The flame bends, though no wind moves. You feel something shift, not physically, spiritually. You're not alone in here, at least that's what you feel. Some of the workers refuse to enter. They mutter about the curse. They say the tomb is guarded, that breaking the seal without permission from the gods brings misfortune. Even Carter, for all his logic and science, keeps the rumors at arm's length. But you feel it. Not evil, just ancient. There's something incredibly fragile about this moment. A boy's treasures, meant to usher him gently into the afterlife, now exposed to modern air, modern tools, modern boots. You can't help but wonder, is this discovery, or is it theft dressed up in nice handwriting? And yet, you can't look away. Here's a fact that might keep you up later. Some of the oils and perfumes in the tomb still carried a faint scent when opened. Imagine that. A whiff of Tutankhamun's favorite perfume still lingering in the air, like a ghost whispering, "Remember me." You walk to the back of the chamber where two imposing black statues stand, identical sentinels, guarding a sealed doorway. They wear Nemes headdresses and hold staffs, their eyes inlaid with obsidian. Their feet rest on bricks inscribed with protective spells. You freeze. That's not just another room behind them. That's the burial chamber. You glance at Carter, and he glances at you. No words, just breath held. Tomorrow, maybe next week, that door will be breached. But for tonight, you stand in the antechamber, in a space between worlds, between curiosity and reverence, between discovery and disturbance. You can almost hear Tut's voice, saying, "You've come far enough." So you bow your head and back away. The sun rises sluggishly over the valley, casting long, golden arms down into the shadows of the cliffs. You sit beside Carter, sipping strong, gritty coffee that tastes like determination and dust. Around you, the team stirs. Word is spreading. Fast, a sealed Tutankhamun. The press is circling like vultures. Egyptian officials are tightening their grip. And you're about to step deeper into the earth than most humans ever will. But not yet. First comes the boring part. Documentation. Measurements, photographs, drawings, catalog numbers. You record every object in the antechamber before a single item is removed. It's exhausting work, performed in blazing sun and tomb-still silence. The team works in linen and sweat, brushing sand from carved lion paws, counting jars of wine, lifting papyrus bundles as gently as sleeping babies. It's a grind, but it has to be done. If one item moves out of place, the context is lost, the story collapses. Here's your history nugget for the night. Carter worked with a meticulous photographer, Harry Burton, who took over 3,000 glass plate photos of the tomb's contents. Each exposure was carefully staged using mirrors and sunlight, no flashes, no rush. Some say Burton's photos are the real treasure of the tomb. Now the quirky part. Carter was obsessed with organization. He even drew maps of which items should be unpacked in what order, as if Tut's afterlife wardrobe might wrinkle if unboxed. Incorrectly, there's something almost comical about watching hardened archaeologists tiptoe around sandals and red baskets, muttering about preservation, and yet they never lose the wonder. You're cataloging a golden shrine when one worker freezes. "Snake," he whispers. You turn. Sure enough, a cobra slithers across the threshold. It doesn't strike. It simply passes slow, regal. A cobra, the protector of the pharaoh. The team goes still. Someone crosses themselves. Another whispers. A prayer. That's when the rumors start to bubble. First, it's Carter's yellow canary, remember it? Eaten by a cobra just days after the tomb's opening. Then, a week later, Lord Carnarvon, the patron who funded the Digfall's ill. A mosquito bite, they say. Then sepsis, then death. In Cairo, in the middle of a thunderstorm, the lights go out across the city the moment he dies. Historians still argue whether the curse of the pharaoh was invented by newspapers or truly believed by the locals. But it doesn't matter now. The whispers have taken root. Reporters call it Tut's revenge. They love the irony. A forgotten boy king striking from beyond the grave. You, of course, roll your eyes. Mostly still, it's hard not to feel the weight of something watching. And then there's the logistics. How do you move this much treasure? How do you keep it from crumbling in your hands? Wooden objects are flaking apart. Linen has fused to itself. Oils have gone thick and tarry. You help Carter's team invent new methods on the fly. Humidity controls, custom crates, even wax coating. It's like performing surgery on relics that were never meant to see daylight again. Your fingertips burn slightly from brushing powdered gold leaf off a statue of Tut as a child, one hand clutching a crook, the other an open palm. The statue looks gentle, vulnerable. You wonder if that was intentional. Another moment stops you, a pair of sandals, worn, delicate. Made of gold, yes, golden flip-flops. Tutankhamun, fashion icon. Some pieces still carry fingerprints, artisans' marks. You trace them, stunned. You were touching the same places an ancient craftsman once did, the same surface Tut Matov. Walked in, leaned against, or placed beside his bed. It's personal now. The antechamber slowly empties, each item carefully labeled, boxed, and removed. Each trip out is a gauntlet through reporters and officials. You sneak out once to catch a glimpse of the Nile beyond the cliffs. It shimmers, eternal. The same river Tut likely sailed in his youth, watching the world go by from beneath a canopy of lotus and linen. When you return, it's time. The statues guarding the burial chamber are ready to be moved. They're obsidian. Eyes flash as the light hits them one last time. You wonder if they'll miss their post 3,000 years on duty, and not a single complaint as they're shifted. You feel the chamber sigh. The sealed doorway behind them is covered in plaster, stamped with royal insignia, and still untouched. Carter hesitates, then he speaks. We proceed. You step aside as the tools are brought out, delicate, not crude. Every chip of plaster is preserved, every mark photographed. It's like opening a patient's chest without breaking the skin. As the final layer is removed, a deep breath moves through the group. No one speaks. The stone shifts. A gap opens. Beyond it lies the burial chamber, dark, still waiting. You reach for the lamp and step forward. The burial chamber is a different beast entirely. As you cross the threshold, the temperature seems to drop. Not physically, emotionally. The air feels denser here, like it's holding its breath. Even the candlelight dulls, shadows clinging tighter to the walls. Everyone around you moves a little slower, a little softer, as though they've walked into a cathedral made of silence. At first glance, the chamber seems smaller than expected, but your eyes adjust and that's when you see it. The walls glow, with scenes painted in a rush of ochre and cobalt. Tutankhamun embraced by Osiris, the god of the dead, Anubis watching with jackal eyes. A pharaoh's journey into eternity, splashed across the plaster like an ancient graphic novel. Here's your fact for the evening. Unlike most royal tombs, which were adorned with sprawling texts from the Book of the Dead, Tutankhamun's burial chamber walls are surprisingly minimal, just a few key scenes. Most experts agree this tomb was not meant for a king. At least, not this king. That theory brings you to the real marvel in the center of the room, a massive gilded shrine that fills nearly the entire space. It's not just a coffin, it's a nesting doll of sacred enclosures, one inside the other, each layer more precious than the last. You can't even see the sarcophagus, yet it's buried under layer upon layer of gold, wood, and ritual. It's like the afterlife had its own set of security checkpoints. You walk slowly around the shrine, careful not to touch. Massive falcon wings stretch across the panels. Sacred spells run in neat, hurried lines. And the center is on beeswax. An old stone clings to your nostrils like incense burned in another lifetime. Here's a strange but delightful detail. The outermost shrine was so large that Carter's team had to dismantle part of the tomb's doorway just to get it out. They had not anticipated quite so much. Coffin, and that's just the start. There are 4 gilded shrines stacked around the sarcophagus like a royal babushka. Inside the final shrine, a carved quartzite sarcophagus. Inside that, 3 nested coffins, the first 2 made of wood and gold leaf, the third solid gold, nearly 240 pounds of it, You blink, because this isn't just burial, it's art, it's obsession. It's the most dramatic do not disturb sign in history. Still, something tugs at Eutho's paintings. They're off. The brushwork is crude in places, the plaster uneven. In one spot, Carter points out a smudged figure where the paint hadn't even dried before the tomb was sealed. It's almost as if someone was rushing, not because of time, but because of panic. Historians still argue whether Tut's death came so suddenly that his burial had to be improvised. Some believe the chamber was painted in just days. Others claim the room had been built for a lesser, noble and hastily repurposed. Either way, it wasn't fit for a king, but it was what they had. The contrast is jarring gold of divine craftsmanship wrapped in walls that feel like a student's final project. You step closer and notice something else, a name beneath another name, scraped away. Retouched. This happens often with Tut. Erased, replaced, remembered only when he was needed again. You lean in, peering at the lid of the sarcophagus. Its carved surface is cracked not by time, but by man. Carter broke it accidentally when removing the lid. A miscalculation of weight and leverage. You cringe as he describes it. A massive stone slab falling inward, splitting the corner like a dropped antique. It's a reminder, even in reverence, destruction lurks. But let's lighten things up with a strange tidbit. On one of the nested coffins, gold foil had been reused from another artifact, possibly from a female burial. Some argue it may have belonged to Nefertiti herself. Egyptologists still debate if Tut's gear was recycled royal leftovers. He was, after all, a king of convenience in a troubled age. You circle back to the sarcophagus and rest your hand gently on its side. Cool, smooth, humming with memory. This is the closest anyone has come to Tutankhamun in over 30 centuries. And beneath all of this, a body, a boy, wrapped in linens, sealed in oils, buried beneath layers of ceremony and secrecy. Carter stands beside you, staring at the shrine seal. He's made it this far, but there's something heavy in his eyes. He knows what's next. Breaking the seal means violating the last sanctuary of the king, but it must be done. One of the workers speaks a warning under his breath. The gods are watching. You agree, but so is the world. You turn away for a moment and gaze at the chamber as a whole of gold, the paint, the faint curls of plaster on the floor. It's breathtaking and heartbreaking, because no matter how careful you are, the moment you leave, this room will never be the same, still you. Raise your lamp one last time, lean forward and whisper a promise. We're here to remember, and then the tools come out. The seal breaks with a sound softer than you'd expect a dry crack, like old parchment snapping under tension. You flinch anyway. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe it's the sheer weight of knowing what you're about to see, the undisturbed body of a king. For centuries, he slept beneath all those layers. Now, after weeks of documenting treasures and tiptoeing around superstition, you're standing over his quartzite sarcophagus as Carter and his team prepare to lift the lid. The chamber is quiet, no idle chatter, no shifting boots, just breathing, shallow, measured, like you're in a church and the congregation is holding its collective breath. With slow, synchronized effort, the lid is raised. The golden face beneath doesn't greet you. It glows at you. You're staring into the face of Tutankhamun, his burial mask, crafted from solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, obsidian, and quartz. The mask rests on the final coffin, like the closing sentence in a book written in eternity. It's beautiful and sad and utterly human. Here's your historical jewel. The mask weighs over 22 pounds and is arguably the most iconic artifact ever discovered from ancient Egypt. Its craftsmanship is flawless, perhaps, because beneath it lies a mummy, in worse condition than anyone expected. Carter doesn't immediately remove the mask. First, the team must remove the final coffin, the one made entirely of gold. It takes hours, careful jostling, slight shifts, tiny wedges and lifts. They place it on a cradle and begin unwrapping the linens. That's when the smell hits. Not rot. Not exactly, it's sweet. Sickly, like charred resin mixed with forgotten perfume. The mummy, they discover, is essentially glued to the bottom of the coffin. The embalmers had poured hot oils and unguents over the body, likely too much, possibly too soon after death. The mixture seeped into the wrappings and hardened like a sticky crust. You wince. Everyone does. Even the tools seem reluctant. Here's the fringe fact that might haunt your dreams. To remove Tut's body from the coffin, Carter's team actually had to cut it apart. Yes, limbs, torso, even the head. They dismembered the king, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The body simply wouldn't budge. Ancient glue, modern dilemma. They tried everything. Warming the resin, softening the wrappings, nothing worked. So they resorted to knives. You turn away, trying not to listen to the muted slicing sounds. Historians still argue whether this decision was justified. Some say Carter should have waited for better techniques. Others insist he had no choice. What's certain is this: the body was never whole again, and what a body it was. Tutankhamun wasn't exactly a vision of divine strength. CT scans and modern analysis reveal a frail frame, curved spine, and that clubbed left foot. You imagine him limping down palace corridors, dragging a leg, hiding the pain. There's evidence of a fracture near the knee, likely sustained just before death, combined with signs of malaria and genetic disorders from generations of royal inbreeding. The picture of a doomed boy becomes clearer. You step closer, peering into the hollow eye sockets of the skull. You whisper, "What happened to you?" No answer, of course, but maybe that silence says more than words. Here's a detail that sticks with you. Tut was buried with 2 tiny mummified fetuses, stillborn daughters, most likely. No inscriptions name them, but DNA testing confirmed their relation. You imagine him grieving their loss, and now resting beside them forever. It adds a thread of heartbreak to the golden grandeur. More strangeness. Tut's chest wall was missing, entirely gone. Some blame ancient embalmers, others suspect post-mortem damage. Even the sternum and ribs vanished. A gruesome oversight, or another case of rushed burial. Still, in the middle of all that forensic chaos, the mask sits serena, golden, unto-cubbly. It feels like a lie. A beautiful one. You can't help but wonder if the mask was meant to preserve dignity, or perhaps to hide the truth. Eventually, the body is fully documented. Every inch, every imperfection. You assist in wrapping what remains for transport. There's an odd feeling in the air relief, maybe, but also something like guilt. You helped wake a king, and you helped break him. But then you glance at the mask one last time, and something softens inside you. This wasn't just a king. He was a boy who died too young, ruled too briefly, and was forgotten too quickly, until now. In peeling back his layers, you found something strange and wonderful, not just gold, Not just treasure, but story, his story, and it's only just beginning. You're sitting cross-legged on the floor of the side chamber now, surrounded by chaos. Golden beds, shaped like divine beasts, loom over Julians with fierce stares. Cow-headed frames curling into strange elegance, a winged serpent stretched along a bed frame as if it had just slithered into a nap. But these aren't for sleeping. They're guardians, meant to protect Tut in the realm beyond life. And right now, you're trying to figure out how to catalog them without collapsing anything or accidentally summoning a god. This is the treasury, a cramped side room off the burial chamber, and it's just as overwhelming as the rest. Maybe more so. You'd think someone organizing the afterlife would go for more of a Marie Kondo approach, but his idea of packing light included dozens of shrines, jars, statuettes, and canopic vessels filled with his internal organs. Here's tonight's historical nugget. The treasury contained the canopic shrine, an ornate golden structure housing alabaster jars shaped like Tut's head. Each jar held one mummified organ: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, each wrapped with the same reverence as the king himself. And standing watch over all this, Anubis, you glance at. The black jackal statue crouched on a shrine, platform, ears perked, eyes glinting with inlays, body tensed as if it might leap down at any moment. The god of embalming and protector of tombs. You try not to make eye contact. Nearby, Shabti's small figurines carved to serve the pharaoh in the afterlife line up like sleepy soldiers. Some are simple, others are adorned with whips and hoes, ready to plow ghostly fields. Over 400 of them. No wonder Tut didn't need a LinkedIn. Here's your fringe detail for the evening. Some of the Shabtis were inscribed with spells, telling them to do actual work in the afterlife, like farming, irrigation, or grain counting. Tut was going to rest in peace while these guys did his taxes. That's power. But there's something else about this rumor, kind of heaviness, not just the items. The air. You turn toward a gilded boat model tucked behind a stack of ceremonial boxes. Inside is a solar barcross vessel for crossing the sky. Tut was expected to ride it each night through the underworld and into rebirth. It's beautiful, delicate, a cosmic Uber with divine flair. And then dash chariots. Yes, plural. You count at least 6 chariots, some broken down for space. One is battle-ready, another ceremonial, with inlaid ivory and decorative gold studs. You trace your hand along its rim and imagine a teenage king holding the reins. His bad foot braced awkwardly, racing across the Nile floodplains. Historians still argue whether Tutankhamun actually fought in battle, or whether the chariots were purely symbolic. His injuries suggest he may not have been very mobile. Then again, kings didn't need to do the fighting, just look like they could. And what about that broken leg? Some scholars speculate he may have fallen from a chariot. Others point to congenital weakness. Some even argue the fracture happened after death. The cause of Tut's end remains a mystery wrapped in resin. You scribble notes and help catalogue gilded boomerangs, ceremonial arrows, and the remains of a harp. Yes, a harp. Tut was travelling into eternity with music, firepower, and a full staff. Clearly, he wasn't planning to rough it. But beneath the luxury, there's a rush to it all. Items stuffed too tightly. Paint not quite dry. A layer of improvisation in what should have been a perfectly rehearsed ritual. You feel it everywhere there. Haste. Here's the catch. The items are magnificent, but the planning, questionable. Even the embalming was off. Remember the overly generous resin bath from earlier? Some think that was part of the hurry. Just pour everything on him and seal it fast. You imagine someone saying, "We've got another funeral at 5. You sigh. Because buried beneath all this splendor is something quieter, something lonely. Tut wasn't just buried in gold. He was buried in Noiser royal echo chamber, stuffed with status and ceremony, but not necessarily with love. There are no personal letters, no affectionate inscriptions, not even a love mum on a linen bandage. You sit back, legs aching, notebook full, and stare at the jackal statue again. He's still watching. You whisper, "Don't worry, we'll put everything back the way it was." But you both know you won't, because once you open the tomb, once the world sees, it can never be unseen. The curse isn't death, the curse is exposure, and the world is hungry for wonder. The first newspaper headline appears within days. Pharaoh's curse strikes. Lord Carnarvon is dead. The man who funded the entire expedition, who stood in that tomb's entrance with Carter and you not long ago, is now gonfelled by an infected mosquito bite and pneumonia. The British press doesn't miss a beat. The tomb is cursed, they say. The ancient gods are angry. Egypt is reclaiming its king in the only way it can. You sip your tea in Cairo and stare at the newsprint. There's a photo of the entrance to the tomb, shadowy and ominous. You were just there. It doesn't feel haunted. It feels sad, heavy, but not malicious. Still, the deaths keep stacking. A radiologist who x-rayed the mummy dies unexpectedly. A member of Carter's team is found poisoned. Carter's own pet canary, swallowed by a cobra the day the tomb was opened. Remember that creepy coincidence. You roll your eyes, but you keep a small amulet in your pocket anyway, just in case. Here's the historical fact of the hour. No conclusive scientific evidence has ever supported the idea of a pharaoh's curse. Carter himself lived for over 16 years after the discovery. Most of the team survived for decades, but that doesn't stop the myth. And maybe that's the point. The story of the curse grabs the public's imagination in ways hieroglyphics never could. Suddenly, everyone is talking about Tutankhamun. Newspapers can't print fast enough. Movie studios jump on the bandwagon. A mummy rises from the dead in theaters before the real one's even out of the tomb. The world has Tut fever, and no one's immune. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1920s, Tut mania gripped everything from fashion to jazz. People wore Tut-themed dresses, danced the mummy shimmy, and bought scarab-shaped lockets and ashtrays shaped like sarcophagi. One British cosmetics company even released a perfume called Curse of the Nile, subtle. You laugh now, but it's weirdly touching. For thousands of years, this forgotten boy king was erased from history. Now he's on everyone's lips, on their mantelpieces. In their dreams, you walk into a Cairo cafe and hear 2 American tourists arguing whether Tutankhamun was assassinated or died of malaria. They mispronounce his name, but they know it. That alone is kind of miraculous. Back at the tomb, the mood is changing. Guards have been posted. Carter is more cautious, more guarded. Egyptian authorities are circling tighter, pressing for more control over the artifacts, and tensions are high between Carter and Egyptian antiquities officials. There's pride involved, ownership, cultural identity. Historians still argue whether Carter was a hero of archaeology or a looter in a linen suit. The truth is probably somewhere in between. He documented everything, yes, But he also made choices, shady ones. Rumor has it, he snuck a few objects out of the tomb, gifts for dignitaries, personal mementos. One artifact even ended up in a desk drawer in England. Meanwhile, the items continue to be catalogued, boxed, and prepped for the Cairo Museum. It takes years, nearly a decade. Piece by glittering piece, Tutankhamun's world is moved from darkness into light. But the deeper you go, the louder the whispers grow. The curse doesn't stop. A fire destroys the home of one British aristocrat who visited the tomb. An illness takes another. Soon, more than a dozen people connected to the tomb's opening have died under odd or unfortunate circumstances. Coincidence? The rational part of you says yes. The human part of you watches shadows a little. More closely these days, you keep dreaming about the burial chamber, the statues, the stillness, the moment the seal broke. You dream about the golden mask, and, in the dream, it speaks. You can't hear what it says, but the tone is calm, regal, not angry. You wake up sweating anyway. That's the true genius of the curse. It doesn't have to be real to work. It just has to stick in your mind, like a grain of sand that itches under the skin of belief. And here's a little-known detail. When the British Museum tried to host a major exhibit of Tutankhamun's treasures, it was denied twice. Some say it was politics. Others, the curse. Why risk it? You chuckle and light another candle. The jackal watches from your sketchbook. The curse isn't just about death. It's about memory. It's about what happens when the past refuses to lie still. Tutankhamun didn't curse anyone. He haunted them. You glance at your notes. Thousands of words, hundreds of items. A life pieced back together through gold and linen and grief. A forgotten king now remembered forever. The golden mask rests beneath glass now. You stand in the Cairo Museum, separated from it by only a thin pane and 3 security guards who look like they haven't blinked in an hour. But still, it feels closer than ever. The light in the room is low, reverent, and the crowd around you whispers like worshippers. You step forward, breath fogging faintly on the glass. And there it is, Tutankhamun's face, not his real face. Of course that didn't fare so well, but the image he wanted to be remembered by. An idealized version of himself, flawless and immortal, with almond-shaped eyes, a gentle smile, and the Nenus headcloth draped in eternal calm. This is the image the world knows best. Printed on t-shirts, replicated in plastic, stolen by dreams. And here's your fact for the day. The burial mask is made of 2 layers of solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli for the eyebrows and cosmetic lines, and with quartz and obsidian for the eyes, and along the back, an inscription from the Book of the Dead, calling on the gods to protect Tut's spirit. But because nothing with Tut is ever simple, there's a secret hidden in the gold. A recent analysis revealed that the mask may not have been made for Tut at all. The ears are pierced, an unusual feature for male masks, but common for royal women. Some scholars now believe the mask was originally intended for Queen Nefertiti, or even Nefertiti, and later repurposed for Tutankhamun when he died unexpectedly. Historians still argue whether that's true, but you're starting to get the pattern. For a king whose name was meant to be forgotten, Tut sure inherited a lot of second-hand glory. You move on through the exhibit. Gold sandals, a fan made with ostrich feathers, miniature coffins for canopic jars, the twin mummified fetuses, his daughters, maybe. One so small it fits in the palm of your hand. A golden throne, inlaid with carnelian and glass, catches your eye. It shows Tut and Ankhesenamun, his queen, in a rare, tender moment. She's anointing him, smiling, they're barefoot, their hands. Touch, you freeze, in all the splendor. This is what hits hardest, this tiny intimacy carved into gold. You don't know what their marriage was like. Maybe it was arranged, awkward, ceremonial, but in this image, it looks human, quiet, as if for just one moment. They forgot they were gods. Here's your quirky detail for tonight. Among the many items buried with Tut was a board game called Senator Favorite in ancient Egypt, one of the oldest known strategy games in the world. It wasn't just for fun. Egyptians believed winning at Senate meant navigating the afterlife safely. You wonder if Tut played it in his last days, praying for good rolls. As you walk the exhibit, you realize the real magic isn't the gold, it's the storytelling. Each item speaks not just of wealth, but of preparation, of belief, of fear. It's not just treasure, it's evidence of a worldview where death wasn't an end, but a departure lounge, where objects became spells, where memory became resurrection, and Tut, he became the ultimate proof. Outside the museum, Cairo roars, cars honk, merchants shout. Life pulses through the streets. But inside, time is sticky, heavy. You feel the weight of centuries pressing in. It's ironic, really. Tutankhamun was a minor pharaoh. His reign was short, his accomplishments minimal. If anything, he should have been a footnote. Instead, he's the headline. And why? Because his tomb wasn't robbed. Because he was buried in a forgotten valley. Because a man with bad teeth and a worse temper named Howard Carter refused to stop digging. It's all chance. Coincidence, fate, if you like poetry. Or maybe Tut planned it that way. You pause at a final display, a ceremonial dagger. Iron, not gold. Fashioned from a meteorite. Yes, really a dagger from the stars. You run your finger along the edge of the glass. Meteoric iron was rare, sacred, believed to be a gift from the heavens. For Tutankhamun to be buried with one meant something cosmic. It meant his soul was meant to return skyward, to become a star. And looking at that blade sleek, ancient alien, you believe it. You step outside, blinking in the Egyptian sun. In your pocket, a ticket stub, a museum brochure, a scarab charm you bought from a vendor named Khalid, who swore it was blessed by Tut himself. You smile, because no matter how skeptical you are, some part of you believes in the magic. How could you? Not you just walk through eternity. The body is back where it began. You step carefully down the stone stairs into the valley once more. The desert wind tugging at your sleeves. The sun, a fierce coin in a bleached sky. This time, you're not here to excavate. You're here to return. Mummy, fractured and brittle, has been placed back in his tomb right there in the burial chamber you helped open years ago. A glass case now surrounds him, climate-controlled, sealed tight. His face, darkened by the embalming resin, is visible again after decades behind museum walls. You lean in. It doesn't feel like reverence. It feels like repair. Here's the historical truth. In 2007, Tutankhamun's body was placed on display. In the tomb, not in the Cairo Museum. The goal, preservation. His remains had begun to deteriorate further, but also, it was symbolic. The boy king had come home. But let's rewind. You still remember the first time you saw the body. Not the mask, not the golden coffins, but him. The shriveled frame, the brittle ribs, the clubbed foot, the skin blackened by the resin that cooked him slowly over centuries like a forgotten offering. There was nothing glorious about it. But now, as you look down at him encased in glass, something's changed. He's no longer just a mummy. He's a presence. Gone is the aura of loot, the breathless treasure hunt energy. What remains is a kind of peace. He's where he was meant to be, not in a crate, not under X-ray, but here. In this quiet stone chamber beneath the cliffs, tourists file past behind you, whispering, snapping photos they'll probably never look at again. One man complains that the tomb looks smaller than it does in the documentaries. A child asks if the mummy is sleeping. You smile. Kids always get it better than we do. Here's your odd detail of the night. While the gold mask, shrines, and coffins remain in Cairo, Tut's body is the only royal mummy still housed in its original tomb. Everyone else got relocated to museum shelves or royal caches, but he stays right here, and he's not alone. You look around the tomb and remember how crowded it once was. The 4 gilded shrines that used to encase the sarcophagus are gone. The antechambers, couches, and chariots gone. Even Anubis has left the treasury. All of it sits under museum lights now. What remains is an echo, faint outlines on the floor where objects once stood, a few remnants of paint clinging to the murals. That jackal black hush that only exists in places meant for the dead. You think about how Carter must have felt in his final years, watching the world devour the tomb piece by piece, watching Egypt argue over rights, museums squabble over loans. The British government tried to tiptoe out of controversy. Everyone wanted a piece of the boy king. Historians still argue whether Carter did right by Tutankhamun. Some hail him as a meticulous scholar, a man of principle. Others accuse him of smuggling, secrecy, and colonial arrogance. In truth, both versions probably lived in the same man. But one thing's certain, without Carter, the world might never have remembered Tut at all. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out an old field sketch your own, a scribbled drawing of the antechamber, dated in the corner. You compare it to the emptiness before you, same space, different soul. Tutankhamun is no longer buried in gold. He's buried in memory, and maybe that's the better treasure. A guard taps you gently on the shoulder. It's time to move along. You nod, stepping away from the glass case, but you glance back once more. He's so small, just bones, really, fragile and shrunken. But then you remember what he started, the golden age of Egyptology, the global fascination, the cultural rediscovery of ancient belief, the spark that lit countless careers, countless obsessions. You remember the jazz bands, the curse headlines, the cosmetics named after his coffin, a boy who ruled for a decade, a boy who died before he could shave, and yet here he lies undisturbed no longer, but never forgotten. You whisper a soft goodbye, not in English, not even in Arabic. You try a phrase in ancient Egyptian you heard a local guide repeat once, Ma Keru. True of voice, it's what they used to say about the righteous dead. You step back into the light. The sun is setting behind the cliffs, casting gold across the stone like the faintest echo of Tutankhamun's treasure. You're not in the Valley Noya in a lab, cooled by humming fans and silent minds, and in front of you lies the Pharaoh again. But this time, it's not about reverence, it's about science. You're staring at a screen filled with 3D scans and radiographic slices of Tutankhamun's body. What was once mystery wrapped in linen is now data measured, digitized, and reconstructed. Every joint, every lesion, every bend of bone has been analyzed, questioned. Ray-analyzed. This is Tutankhamun under the microscope, and the results are haunting. Let's start with the skull. For years, people whispered about a blow to the back of the head. Murder, they said. A political plot. A coup. Some even imagined a palace intrigue straight out of a Netflix drama discovering a betrayal. A dagger in the night, silence in the hallway. But modern CT scans show no evidence of a fatal injury to the skull. The supposed fracture. It occurred after death, probably during the hasty embalming process, or Carter's rough exhumation. So much for ancient CC. But not everything is a myth. Here's your verified fact. Tutankhamun had a severely deformed left foot, likely due to necrosis or collar disease. His foot bones show signs of breakdown, and he walked with a cane, possibly many. In fact, his tomb contained over 130 walking sticks. Some decorative, others clearly worn. You pause on that. Number 130. That's not symbolism. That's suffering. You switch to the next scan. Ribs, gone. Chest wall, completely missing. And unlike the skull fracture, this isn't post-mortem clumsiness. The embalmers actually removed his heart. Why, historians still argue whether it was ritual or panic. Some say the extreme resin used to embalm him effectively cooked his body, making heart removal a necessity. Others wonder if it was symbolic punishment, possibly because of his father, Akhenaten, and his radical rejection of Egypt's traditional gods. No heart, no Book of the Dead in the tomb, no protective scarab amulet. That's not just missing, it's wrong. Egyptian funerary practice hinged on the heart, being weighed against the feather of Matha, symbol of truth. Without a heart, the ceremony can't proceed. It's like showing up to court without a defense. Was it a mistake, or was someone making a statement? You glance up at a photograph on the lab, Walter Tutankhamun's face reconstructed from the scans. It's a soft face, full lips, round cheeks. A teen, really. Not a warrior, not a god. Just a boy who inherited a broken empire and a flawed lineage. And here's your odd but true detail. DNA analysis from 2010 confirmed that Tut was the child of a brother-sister union. Royal incest. It was common in the 18th dynasty, meant to preserve the divine bloodline. But the cost, genetic defects, weakened immune systems, and a high infant mortality rate. Tut wasn't just unlucky, he was engineered for fragility. You scroll further. The scans reveal scoliosis, cleft palate, malaria, and that infamous leg fracture likely sustained just before death, possibly from a fall. Or maybe just from walking with brittle bones and misaligned joints. Historians still debate whether this combination of afflictions was survivable. Maybe the malaria tipped him over. Maybe the fracture led to infection. Maybe he was already dying, one step at a time. You take a deep breath. Science is supposed to bring clarity, but sometimes it just adds more shadows. Because even with all this data bones, diseases, genetic sure, still left with a mystery. A boy who ruled, who was buried in another man's tomb, who vanished from history and returned in a flash. Of gold and suspicion, and somehow he still feels out of reach. You walk down the hallway of the lab and find yourself in front of a replica of the burial chamber. Everything looks familiar, except it's too clean, too fresh, no dust, no darkness. Just bright lights and silicon facsimiles. A group of schoolchildren walks through, giggling. One points at the golden mask and asks, "Is that real?" The tour guide smiles. "No, but the story is." You stay a while longer, staring at the replica, and something hits you. We've picked Tutankhamun apart literally, layer by layer. We've x-rayed his corpse, cracked open his coffins, boiled his name down to hashtags, and hashtags down to souvenir magnets. And yet, for all our efforts, we still don't know him. But maybe that's the point. Some stories aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be felt. Like standing in a dark tomb, hearing your own breath bounce off walls that haven't echoed for 3,000 years, or looking into the empty eyes of a golden mask and feeling the pulse of a boy who once lived, and ruled, and died, and waited for you. You're ankle deep in crushed pigment and cracked plaster, not metaphorically literally. This section of the tomb is a flurry of activity, but not by Carter's team. These are conservators, gloves, tablets, micro-vacuums. The work here is surgical, slow, gentle. You're here to examine what isn't gold. You're here for the paintings. The burial chamber's walls are painted in rich yellows and ochres, with thick black outlines that make the figures pop in that iconic Egyptian style, flat, formal, timeless. There's Tutankhamun being embraced by Osiris, god of the dead. There's Anubis preparing the body. There's the pharaoh walking into eternity, guided by divine hands. At a glance, it's glorious. At second glance, something's off, and you're not the only one who notices. See, compared to the elaborate tombs of Ramses or Seti, murals are basic, small scenes, unfinished edges, visible brushstrokes. One figure is even smudged, as if the paint hadn't dried before the chamber was sealed. Your historical fact: scholars agree that the paintings were rushed. The burial chamber was likely decorated in an extreme hurry, possibly just days before. Burial, that's practically an artistic sprint, especially in the ancient world, where even a single temple column could take months. You crouch and study the paint layers. Some sections are cracking, others have discolored, but here's where it gets truly weird. Your fringe tidbit for this evening: in 2015, researchers noticed brown spots on the wall paintings. Some feared it was molten ancient fungal bloom, but microbiologists analyzed the dots and concluded they were likely caused by microbes that had long since died, but may have been alive when the tomb was sealed. That's right, there may have been a microscopic party happening in Tut's tomb the moment it was closed. Theories suggest that the walls were still wet with organic materials: egg yolk, plant, gums, animal fats. Add in moisture from fresh plaster, and you've got a perfect habitat. Sealed off from air and sunlight, the microbes thrived, until they didn't. You can almost hear Carter saying, "Wonderful things," and now you're thinking, "Slightly fermented things." And yet, these murals matter, because they're not just decoration, they're ritual. Every figure, every symbol, every color is a spell, a roadmap for the soul's journey to the afterlife. So why rush it? Well, that's the big question. Historians still argue whether the tomb was originally intended for someone else, perhaps a noble or lesser official, and was simply commandeered after Tut's sudden death. The small size, the hasty paint job, the missing text sit all suggests improvisation. Some even believe it was meant for a queen. Others point to Tut's own father, Akhenaten, whose unorthodox reign left Egypt in religious and political chaos. Tut's death was not only unexpected, it was inconvenient. Egypt needed closure. Fast, so the priests made it happen. The burial chamber was sealed. The paint was still wet. The resin was still bubbling. And they walked away, hoping the gods would forgive the shortcuts. You stand up, knees cracking, and run your fingers along a mural close, but not touching. A priest's painted hand reaches out toward Tutankhamun's soul. The gesture is gentle, comforting. You imagine the artist rushing to finish. Sweat dripping, torches smoking in the corner, brush trembling, and still they try to make it beautiful. It reminds you that even when time is short, people want to honor. They want to get it right. Even if they don't, you notice something else, too. On one wall, the Cartouche Tut's royal name appears, slightly altered. Under ultraviolet light, faint traces of a previous name emerge. Could the original inscriptions have honored someone else? Was Tut's name painted over another? The evidence is faint. Some say the name might have belonged to his successor, Aether. Same Eye who presided over his burial and later became pharaoh himself. It's eerie, like watching someone write their own eulogy only to have it hijacked. You exhale. This tomb tells a story of improvisation, of trying to create sacred space under pressure. It's like the paint itself is whispering, "We did the best we could." And maybe that's what makes it special. Because while other pharaohs built megastructures and mural labyrinths over decades, Tut's team threw everything they had into this tiny chamber in just a few weeks. And still, it lasted 3,000 years. That's not failure, that's endurance. You leave the chamber quietly, boots dusty with the colors of eternity, and realize something. The tomb didn't just preserve a king, it preserved the moment of goodbye. You're in a vault now. Not a tomb, not a museum. A vault. Dim lights buzz overhead. Climate monitors hum softly. Metal shelves rise in tall, clinical rows, each drawer labeled in a looping hand you recognize from field notes. These are the things that didn't sparkle. The things no one bought postcards of. The things that didn't make the Tutankhamun exhibition, but they still matter. This is where the puzzle truly deepens. Tutankhamun's tomb was overflowing with gold. Yes, but gold is loud. You know what's quiet. Absence. And the more time you've spent cataloging, researching, assembling finds, the more you realize something huge is missing. Words. Here's your historical fact. Of the over 5,000 artifacts removed from the tomb, only a handful contain actual inscriptions beyond names and formulaic prayers. There are no scrolls, no papyri, no detailed records, no personal letters from the boy king to his advisors, family, or gods. Nothing that tells you what he thought, what he feared, what he hoped for. That's weird, because ancient Egypt was bureaucratic. To a fault, they wrote everything down. Decrees, hymns, grocery lists. Pharaohs especially were obsessed with legacy. Yet for Tut, silence. Like a library was burned and only the jewelry survived. Historians still argue whether the lack of written material was due to the hasty burial, religious suppression, or simple chance. Some suggest scrolls may have existed and simply disintegrated, but that doesn't explain the total lack of funerary texts on the walls, especially in a royal tomb. You pull open a drawer and find a small ivory label tied with string. It lists the contents of a chest, linens, oils, sandals, carefully scribed, but purely inventory. Not narrative, not memory. It's like someone tried to erase everything about the boy but his face. And that raises a question. Was Tutankhamun buried to be remembered, or buried ... to be forgotten? You start to think about Akhenaten, a Gentos heretic. Father, the one who tried to force monotheism on Egypt, the one who closed temples, moved the capital, and made everyone worship a glowing disk in the sky. When Akhenaten died, Egypt reacted like a scorned lover. His statues were smashed, his name scrubbed, his memory literally defaced. Tutankhamun, the boy left behind, tried to fix it. He restored the old gods, moved the capital back, reopened the temples, and yet that stain remained. Tutankhamun's name almost disappeared too. His tomb, untouched, was the only reason we know him today. Without it, he'd just be a footnote in a shattered lineage. And here's your strange tidbit for tonight. Some scholars believe Tutankhamun was buried under cover of night without a full royal procession. Not out of shame, but to avoid further controversy. The priests may have feared another backlash, or worse, intervention. It was damage control, ritual damage control, and the absence of texts. That might not be accidental. It might have been strategy. You open another drawer. Inside a bundle of linens, plain, frayed. The burial wrappings. These held him once, cradled his body in resin and oil. You lean closer, imagining the embalmers folding the fabric around his limbs, knowing time was short. The pressure high. Did they know they were burying a pharaoh? Did they care? Or were they just doing a job no one else wanted? There's something unsettling about realizing that the person you've spent years studying, who ruled Egypt, commanded armies, shaped a nation, might have died in relative silence. With few mourners, no grand oration, no epic tomb inscriptions, just layers of linen, a few hurried brushstrokes, and a mask that says more about who he wasn't than who he was. You sit down on a steel bench and breathe in the cool, filtered air. It smells of dust and antiseptic. There are no incense trails here, no whispered prayers. Just facts, fragments, absences, and yet, somehow, Tutankhamun won, despite the missing scrolls, despite the hasty paintings, despite the erasure of his father, the skepticism of later kings, and the plunder of millennia. He is the one who endured. He's not Ramses the Great with his grand temples. He's not Seti with his ceiling full of stars. He's a boy with brittle bones and a borrowed tomb. But when people speak of Egypt, they speak his name first, not because of power, because of discovery. You close the drawer and run your fingers over the cool metal. It vibrates slightly under your hand, like something inside still wants to be heard. Maybe the silence isn't empty. Maybe it's waiting. You're standing in a velvet dark hall, but the light isn't Gonit's curated. Spotlights bloom like golden lotus petals across black surfaces. Glass cases shimmer. The air smells faintly of dry linen, wood polish, and anticipation. You're not in Egypt now. You're on tour. This is Tutankhamun's traveling road show, and it's massive. You walk slowly through the exhibit, where over 150 of the tomb's treasures gleam under museum lights in cities far from the Nile: Paris, Los Angeles, Tokyo, London. Each display is arranged like a sacred constellation. Labels whisper in multiple languages. Visitors shuffle quietly, earbuds tuned to audio guides. Children tugging at parents who can't stop staring. Here's your historical fact. Tutankhamun's treasures have been exhibited globally for decades. The first blockbuster tour began in the 1960s with Tutankhamun and the Golden Age of the Pharaohs, and drew millions of visitors. The 1972 British Museum show drew over 1.6 million, still the most visited in the museum's history, and the crowd Obsessed, Tut's golden mask, when it traveled, became an international celebrity. His throne, a viral sensation decades before the internet. People lined up for hours just to glimpse a crook and flail. Security guards stood stiffer than the statues. Gift shops sold scarab-shaped soap, canopic jar shot glasses, and I saw the boy king tote bags. You laugh, but also, you're impressed. This wasn't just history. It was spectacle, and here's a charming little tidbit. In San Francisco, in 1979, a couple got married inside the Tutankhamun exhibit. They exchanged vows beside the golden statue of Tut as a child king. The priest compared the endurance of Egyptian legacy to the endurance of marriage. Bold move. But this phenomenon goes deeper than gold and selfies. Tut's tour sparked new archaeologists, kids who stared into a glass case and said, "I want to know more." College students who changed their majors. Adults who bought thick coffee table books they'd never read, just to feel like they owned a fragment of mystery. And the artifacts themselves, they glow under museum lights. You linger at a display of inlaid boxes, ivory, ebony, gilded trim. You can tell these weren't just made for burial, they were used. Worn corners, smoothed edges. One box bears scratches, like a young king once dragged it across a stone floor or perhaps packed it hastily with sandals and linen before a trip. They're not relics, they're luggage. You glance at the next case. Tut's dagger, yes, the meteorite dagger, the one forged from sky iron. It shines like something out of a sci-fi epic. And the plaque beneath it just casually says, believed to have been crafted from a meteorite. Likely ceremonial. Likely ceremonial. The kid was buried with a space sword. Of course it was ceremonial. You overhear a man whisper to his daughter, "He was just your age when he became king." She frowns. "That's way too much responsibility." You nod. "Exactly, and still, Tut carried it, limping, fragile, short-lived, but still carried it." The exhibition wins toward its climax. A life-size video projection of the tomb's antechamber, recreated in exquisite detail. The couches stacked like fallen animals, the chariots crammed into corners, the chest with board games. A voiceover reads Carter's notes. It was full of gold and blackness. It took my breath away. You step back and take it in. Yes, still does. But here's the irony and the heartbreaker. The treasures are moving, but the tomb is crumbling. Back in the valley, Tut's burial chamber suffers from tourist foot traffic. Heat, humidity, human breath decays, silent partners. Some experts have begged to seal the tomb off forever. Others argue that doing so would rob Egypt of its star attraction. Historians still argue whether the treasures should be touring at all. Some call it cultural diplomacy. Others call it exploitation. After all, isn't the boy king Egyptian? Shouldn't he stay home? You consider both sides. But then you look at the crowd as wide. Mouths open, hearts stirred, and you realize something simple. Tutankhamun was buried in silence, but he rose in story, and now he doesn't belong to one country, or even one era. He belongs to everyone who ever looked into that golden mask and felt wonder flood in like torchlight into darkness. He belongs to the dreamers. You move toward the exit, past framed quotes and faded photographs of Carter's crew. There's one last item, a replica of Tut's ring. You pick it up, feel the weight. It's too big for your finger, but that's fine. It was never really meant to fit. You're standing at the center of an argument, dressed as a museum. The gallery is hushed, high-ceilinged, echoing with quiet shoes and guided whispers. But the silence can't hide the tension in the glass. The question looms like a carved lint above every case, every artifact. Who owns a pharaoh? Because Tutankhamun's treasures, the thrones, the statues, the chest of linen, even that dagger from the stars, don't just belong to history. They belong to someone, and that someone is up for debate. Here's your cold, clear historical fact. After Carter excavated Tutankhamun's tomb under the supervision of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, all the artifacts, all of them, were declared property of Egypt, not Britain, not Carter, not Lord Carnarvon. This was, in many ways, the beginning of Egypt reasserting its right to its own past. And yet, the story's stickier than that. Carter had a deal. Not a legal one, a gentleman's agreement, a quiet expectation that his years of labor and expense might earn him a portion of the loot. That was how it had always worked before. A share for the excavator, a share for the state. But Tut changed the rules. The world was watching, and Egypt wasn't going to lose her golden boy again. Carter was furious. Rumors began to swirl. He was hiding things, smuggling them out. When officials accused him, he doubled down, closing the tomb, barring access, threatening resignations. At one point, the tomb was padlocked by the government. Historians still argue whether Carter stole objects or simply borrowed them. What we do know, some Tutankhamun artifacts turned up in private collections years later in New York. In London, even in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one curator found a fragment of a chariot, traced it back to the tomb, and quietly returned it. No lawsuits, no press, just history, backdoored. Here's your offbeat little tidbit. One of the missing items, an inlaid hawk-head bracelet, was found decades later in a storage drawer at a university in the UK. Someone had tucked it away, like a paperweight. It wasn't even catalogued. You shake your head. Even kings get misplaced. But what about now? The Egyptian government has made it clear. Tutankhamun stays in Egypt. No more traveling exhibitions of the Golden Mask. No more lending the sacred. It's not just about ownership, it's about identity. For Egypt, Tut is a symbol of sovereignty, pride, and reclamation. And it's not just Tut. Museums worldwide are being pressured to return ancient artifacts, the Rosetta Stone, Nefertiti's bust, Cleopatra's needles. The debate rages. Should the descendants of a culture reclaim their heritage? Or does history, once shared, become global? You walk past a panel titled From Discovery to Diplomacy. It features a photo of Carter, dusty and defiant, next to an image of the new Grand Egyptian Museum rising near the pyramids, a sleek, modern colossus built to house everything Tutankhamun. Over 5,000 objects, for the first time, reunited under one roof. And not just any roof, an Egyptian one. It's a powerful answer to the ownership question. Give back and build better. Still, the argument persists. Some museum officials worry about political instability, conservation standards, tourism economics. Others simply refuse to let go of their crown jewel. You step outside the gallery into the gift shop, where all debates inevitably dissolve into bookmarks and plush scarabs. Tourists buzz around arms, loaded with miniature sphinx and replica masks. No one's shouting about ethics here, but even as you leaf through a glossy book on Tut's treasures, the question floats beside you like a whisper in a painted tomb. Who decides what history belongs to? It's not an easy answer. Maybe no one owns the past. Maybe we're just temporary stewards of it, tasked not with possession, but with preservation, not with glory, but with storytelling, and Tut's story. It grew too big for any one museum, any one country, any one narrative. He doesn't belong in a vault. He belongs in our imaginations. So maybe the real treasure wasn't the gold or the mask or the jewels. Maybe it's this: a dead boy made the whole world remember again. Not power, not empire, not conquest, just the echo of one fragile, forgotten life, calling us back into wonder. The hotel lobby in Cairo smells like old stone and lemon polish. You sit near the window, tea cooling in your hand, and watch the city flow outside like a living fresco honking horns. The call to prayer drifting through the haze, market stalls shimmering in the heat, and on every street corner, Tutankhamun posters, billboards, souvenirs. You've seen his face etched into the side of soda machines. His eyes glow from neon signs outside fast food joints. There's a bar down the street called Pharaoh's Curse. Happy hour until 7. It's surreal. Like the Boy King is moonlighting as a celebrity. Here's your historical fact. Since the 1920s, Tutankhamun has become the most famous pharaoh in history, not because of what he did, but because of what was left behind. His face has become the universal symbol of ancient Egypt, more recognizable than Ramses or Cleopatra, or even the pyramids themselves. Not bad for a teenager with bone disease. But let's talk about Tutmonia, the cultural tidal wave that followed. His rediscovery, it didn't end in the 20s. Oh no, it evolved. It adapted. It found new media, new merch, new memes. In 1978, comedian Steve Martin released King Tut, a novelty song performed in full pharaonic costume on Saturday Night Live. It was weird, it was catchy, and it sold over 1 million copies. You think about that for a moment. A boy buried in silence became a funkified punchline in a polyester suit. Tutankhamun was an exhibit, a disco icon, and a Halloween costume sometimes all at once. That's your quirky tidbit. The US Federal Trade Commission actually investigated the use of Tut's image on counterfeit products during the 1970s exhibition tour. You know you've made it when you need trademark protection. 3,300 years after death, even fashion wasn't safe. Designers mimicked the jewelry and color palettes of his burial chamber. Turquoise, gold, coral reds. Egyptian motifs strutted down catwalks in New York and Paris. Cleopatra eyeliner surged back into popularity. Perfume bottles were molded like canopic jars, and the tourism industry exploded. Flights to Egypt spiked. Nile cruises returned. Souvenir stalls began cranking out mass-produced scarabs faster than you could say Valley of the Kings. You even saw a bobblehead Tut in the airport his tiny, golden head shaking judgment at your jet lag. Historians still argue whether this pop culture frenzy trivializes the past or breathes new life into it. Does it cheapen Tutankhamun to plaster his face on fridge magnets and casino slot machines? Or is this just another form of resurrection? After all, the Egyptians believed in remembering, that memory was survival, that to speak the name of the dead was to keep them alive by that measure. Tut is immortal. He's been animated on TV, referenced in rap lyrics, turned into a Fortnite skin, yes, really, and invoked in marketing campaigns from toothpaste to tequila. The boy who was nearly erased now appears in every timeline. You step outside and walk the shaded edge of Tahrir Square. A street vendor sells calendars with Tut's face superimposed on galaxies and waterfalls. Another has a pyramid-shaped snow globe, and yet, beneath the kitsch, something holds steady. That face, the one from the mask, calm, eternal. Patient. You think about the image burned into millions of brains, those blue-lined eyes, the golden skin, the slight, amused smile, as if Tut knows something. No one else does. He probably does. He knows what it's like to be forgotten, to lie untouched, unspoken, unworshipped for over 30 centuries, and he knows what it's like to rise again. You pass a bookstore window. There it is, a King Tutankhamun, the boy king front cover, golden face, bold serif font. Next to it, a cookbook and a thriller novel. You can't decide if he's out of place or completely at home. He is the story now, not just a king, not just a corpse, an idea. You pause at the curb as a taxi screeches past, wrapped in an ad for an exhibit you saw last week. The driver's humming something. You swear it's the Steve Martin song. You smile, because here, in the middle of Cairo, surrounded by noise, neon, and Nefertiti-themed chewing gum, you realize something very simple. Tutankhamun isn't a relic anymore. He's a legend, and legends don't sit still. The tomb has changed since you first entered it. Not just the atmosphere, not just the artifact's dash itself. Gone are the crates, the dust, the whispers of hurried footsteps echoing off stone. Now LED lights guide the path. A protective barrier surrounds the sarcophagus. Small climate monitors blink softly in the corners like modern amulets. And beside the entrance, a rack of headphones for guided tours. Tutankhamun, once hidden from the world, now receives 500 visitors a day. You step aside as a group moves through. Phones out, flashes forbidden, though someone always forgets. They take photos, not of the tomb, but of each other inside the tomb, proof, perhaps, that they were close to something timeless, something gold, something famous. Here's your historical fact. In 2009, the Egyptian government partnered with conservation groups to create a replica of Tutankhamun's tomb, painstakingly reproduced down to the cracks, pigment flakes, and discoloration. It was designed to take the pressure off the real site. Fewer feet, less breath, less heat, more time. But the public didn't want the copy. They wanted the aura. You glance at the sarcophagus, still here, still in the same place. It's always been. But something's different now. Maybe it's the wear on the mural's fine cracks like ancient veins running through the plaster. Maybe it's the footpath etched into the stone by thousands of shoes. Maybe it's the silence between visitors, thinner than it once was. Tutankhamun is fading again, not into dust, but into routine. The boy who launched 1,000 exhibits now risks becoming just another stop on the itinerary. A must-see, a box to check. Louvre, check. Eiffel Tower, check. Boy King, yep, gold, small, kinda spooky. Moving on, and this is the real curse. Not the spider bites, or sepsis, or crumbling ceilings, but familiarity, overexposure. Tourists now come and go in waves. Some whisper reverently, others scroll through Instagram between rooms. One teen reads the plaque on the wall and says, "Oh, he was like only 19, as if he expected more. You don't blame them, you're one of them, and yet, you're not you. Were there when it was found, when the candle flame first flickered across lion-headed couches and ivory handles, when the resin clung to the king's body like grief hardened into syrup, when the paintings were still wet beneath your gaze. You remember the moment Carter whispered, "Yes, wonderful things," and that still lives in you. You glance toward a small side panel, where one display case offers something easily missed. A fragment of linen, fragile, browned, overlooked, but you recognize it. It's one of the wrappings, one of the original layers that cradled Tutankhamun's body as it was, lowered into the coffin. Most people walk right past it. It's not gold. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't tweet well. But you stand there for a long time, because that linen is the closest thing to a touch. All the gold in the world is cold. That linen was warm once. You think of Ankhesenamun, his queen. We still don't know what happened to her. No tomb, no mummy, just a few desperate letters she may have written to foreign kings, begging for help after her husband's death. Was she there when they wrapped him? Did she weep? Was this linen placed by her hand? Historians still debate her fate, whether she married whether she vanished into obscurity, or whether she was buried in some yet undiscovered chamber beneath the Theban cliffs. Tutankhamun left behind no heirs, only echoes. But those echoes are loud. They've shaped a century of curiosity, sparked revolutions in archaeology, lit up the faces of children dragging their parents through museum halls, carved grooves in the very floor you're standing on. You step away from the linen, toward the exit. A recording plays on loop overhead, faint temple music, layered with the murmur of ancient words no one understands. A voice narrates in 3 languages. Tutankhamun, the boy who ruled, who died too young, who rose again through gold and story. You close your eyes, and in that moment, just for a breath, you feel him. Not the pharaoh, not the mummy, just the boy alone, forgotten then, remembered and still waiting. Night falls over the Nile like a curtain. You drift toward the riverbank under a velvet sky, where papyrus rustles in the hush of evening and the water mirrors the constellations like a silver spell. You've left the museums, the vaults, the replicas behind. What remains is Egypt itself, timeless, breathing, and stitched with memory. Somewhere behind you, tucked into the sun-bleached cliffs of the Theban West Bank, lies the tomb. KV 62. You can almost feel its presence, silent and sealed. The antechamber is empty now. The couches are gone. The shrines disassembled. The mask under museum glass, and yet he's still there. Tutankhamun. The mummy remains, encased in climate-controlled glass inside his burial chamber. His face blackened by resin, features diminished by time, is visible to any visitor willing to look beyond the mask. But not everyone looks closely. Some take the photo, check the box, move on, but you stay, because now you understand. Tut's tomb isn't just an archaeological find, it's a mirror of curiosity, of legacy, of loss. And it's aging not just because of moisture or time or human traffic, but because it was never built to last. Here's your historical fact. Most pharaonic tombs were constructed over decades. Tut's was likely completed in a matter of months. Everything about its size, depth, decoration was modest by royal standards. He died unexpectedly, and the builders were forced to adapt. It was a backup tomb, a placeholder for a forgotten boy, and now it's the most visited burial chamber in the Valley of the Kings. The irony is so thick it practically echoes. Here's your offbeat tidbit. In recent years, archaeologists have scanned the tomb walls with radar. Why? Because they suspect there may be more rooms, hidden chambers. One theory, championed by Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves, suggests that Nefertiti herself may be buried just beyond Tut's north wall. A hidden doorway, a second burial, a secret within a secret. Historians still argue whether the scans show actual voids or just geological quirks. The Ministry of Antiquities has been cautious, some say too cautious. Others say patience. These walls waited 3,000 years. What's another decade? But that's the thing about Tutankhamun. He always almost tells you more. You sit beside the river now, watching a felucca sail drift past, its canvas glowing white in the moonlight. In the distance, the cliffs glow orange from hidden lights. Tourists, even in the dark. You think of the first time you descended those tomb steps with Carter, the dust, the hush, that famous little hole. You wonder what the ancient Egyptians would think of it all. The crowds, the cameras, the gift shops. Would they be horrified, or would they be satisfied? Because Tutankhamun wasn't meant to be remembered. His name was struck from king lists. His father's reforms rejected, his tomb recycled, his death inconvenient. But the world remembered anyway, not because of what he did in life, but because he was found. That's the thing about legacy, it doesn't always belong to the mighty. Sometimes it clings to the overlooked, the small, the accidental dot. Sometimes history crowns you in hindsight, and Tut, he wears it well. You rise from the bank and walk along the ancient path once used by priests and pilgrims. The stars wheel overhead, the same stars Tut's astronomers studied millennia ago. You pause and look up. There it is, the constellation of Orion, known in ancient Egypt as Sar, the celestial form of Osiris, lord of the afterlife. Some believed the soul of the dead pharaoh would ascend into the sky and become a star. You wondered it. Tut, look up at this same constellation. Did he feel insignificant? Did he feel eternal? Maybe both. You whisper his name aloud, Tutankhamun. The sound drifts across the water, then vanishes. But he hears it. He always does, because in this country, the dead listen, and in the story of the boy king, silence speaks louder than gold. You're alone in the dark corridor again, but this time you carry no tools, no sketches, no cameras, just memory and the soft weight of time pressing against your shoulders like a warm ancient hand. The flicker of your flashlight dances on the limestone walls. You pass the patched-up entrance, the scuffed steps, the places where once you heard your own heartbeat echoing louder than any sound. The tomb is quiet, the tourists are gone, and for a moment, just a moment, Tit, as it was, as it always wanted to be still. You step once more into the burial chamber. Tutankhamun lies in his glass case, the only object left in a room once overflowing with impossible splendor. The walls still painted with ochre gods and clumsy brushworks seem to glow faintly in the torchlight. You feel the hush settle into your bones. He's watching you, not with judgment, not with royalty, just with the quiet acceptance of someone who has been waiting a long, long time to be remembered. Here's your historical fact to carry with you. The study of Tutankhamun's tomb sparked not just a media frenzy, but a revolution in archaeology. It taught scientists to be more meticulous, to document better, to ask harder questions. It shifted Egyptology from tomb robbing with notebooks to an actual science of care, conservation, and curiosity. Tut changed the game, not by living long or ruling well, but by being found whole. And yet, he still holds secrets. The broken body, the absence of his heart, the lost letters, the possibly borrowed mask, the unpainted texts, the hidden chambers that might still lie beyond these very walls. Historians still argue whether we'll ever solve it all, but maybe, just maybe, not supposed to. You sit beside the sarcophagus, legs folded like a student. You reach into your pocket and pull out a small, harmless object, a scarab charm, not real, of course, made of polished glass, bought from a market vendor with a toothy smile and a rehearsed tale of blessings. But you keep it anyway, because symbols have power, even fake ones, especially fake ones. They tell you what matters. What matters here is not the gold, not the gossip, not the curses, not the politics. It's that you're here. And so is he, that the boy who should have disappeared into a forgotten crevice of dynastic shuffle instead became the most famous name in ancient history, and that he, broken and buried, still speaks. You place the scarab gently beside the glass, case not as an offering, not as a prop, but as a quiet thank you. Then you rise, you walk slowly toward the exit. Your flashlight dims, and then you stop, turn, look back one last time. The face behind the mask is gone, but in your mind's eye it reappears, lapis-lined, gold-skinned, calm, the smile not smug, but knowing. He was never a mighty conqueror. He was never meant to be eternal, but he is, and always will be, because someone looked into the dark and lit a candle, because someone asked what lies beneath the dust, because someone maybe you refused to forget. So you whisper it aloud, once more, for the empty chamber to hear Tutankhamun. He doesn't answer, he doesn't need to. You climb the steps into the night, into the hush of desert stars. Now, let's slow it down. Take a deep breath, in through your nose, out through your mouth. You're no longer in the valley, no longer wrapped in linen or resin or mystery. You're here, right where you are, safe, still. But let the feeling linger, the faint golden glow behind your eyelids, the hush of stone corridors, the rustle of ancient linen as it's laid gently across the body of a king, the scent of old incense, the murmur of names long whispered into silence. Let all that drift slowly to the back of your mind, like a boat floating down the Nile at dusk. You did well tonight. You walked through centuries. You witnessed glory and grief. You saw a child king rise not in conquest, but in memory, and you remembered him. That's more than most get. So as your breathing evens, and your limbs grow heavier, let the story settle into your chest like warm sand after sunset. No sharp edges, no heavy questions, just stillness, wonder, peace. You're not in the tomb anymore. You're not under the desert. You're here, wrapped in quiet, with a boy king watching over your dreams. Sleep now, traveler. Tomorrow we'll explore something new. But tonight, let your spirit rest in golden light. Good night.